We now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. Here is Reverend Martin.
Los Angeles, and the offering that you are observing or we're presenting to you is entitled It's Time, and you should always ask, what is it time for? And it is always time for social justice. The late Dr. John Henry Clark said that history is a clock that tells people their cultural and political position in life, where they are. He also said history was a compass that lets the people know their geographical location in the world, who they are, where they are, and where they've got to go. And truly, as we, as citizens of the United States of America, and of course people of a darker hue here in this nation, a lot of our history has been mangled. In fact, a lot of world history really has been mangled since the Columbus Holocaust that descended upon the entire world, beginning on the continent of Africa. And so we have a lot of false narratives that are deeply embedded. We have a lot of deeply embedded myths in our educational curriculum and educational syllabi and the like. And a lot of those myths, unfortunately, have been codified in our textbooks, and even worse, in the minds of many of our educators at all levels. And so we have a great battle before us, talking about social justice, and we need to be about our Father's business in setting the record straight. And don't think the record doesn't need to be set straight. Just listen to how some of the diehard ultra-conservative Republican politicians in Washington are describing the January 6th insurrection. For one, now says that if you didn't know any better, you would think that what you were looking at was just a gentle stroll through the Capitol, in between the stanchions there in Statuary Hall. Because there was no violence, nobody had any guns of any sort. And so with that type of ability to rephrase, reframe the narrative, and you see the urgent need, the more to correct and leave behind rather a record of the time and the culture and the political situation in which we have lived through. We always deal with social justice on two levels. One, environmental, which is of course highly tantamount now in our culture due to climate change and all other type of environmental disasters that are continuously occurring, and events that are continuously happening all over this globe. Yes, and especially the contribution of our nation in former centuries and former years when we were very callous and utterly disregarded the environment. All over this nation, whether you go down to Arkansas, the Arkansas River is so polluted because of the renderings from the chicken company that paid off so many politicians down there. I don't want to be called the wrong name, but it was the chicken plant where they render chicken. They just tossed the guts and everything, whatever the offal, all into the river. Now the water in the river is undrinkable. Why? Because of the accumulation over the centuries, over the years in which this chicken plant has been in operation. That's just one example with some of the more immediate ones are down in Mississippi, where they got the citizens have raw sewage coming up in their yards and making the water undrinkable because of the presence of the bacteria, quite naturally, and the filth and the smell from sewage. And that's from lack of care for the drainage systems and the underground drainage and sewage systems all over the city, and that part of that county in Mississippi has gone neglected, and now it is what? It is crumbling. And if that wasn't bad enough, then the people in Flint, Michigan still can't let their children drink the water because the water has lead, and the lead is very deleterious to a child's developing brain. Not to mention the side effects of lead can lead to cancer, other forms of cancer. And so all of these, even in these little few examples, which can be multiplied, don't fool yourself, by the thousands all across the nation. You've heard me talk about the fracking that goes on in our cities and counties, even right here in Inglewood, let alone all across this nation. The fracking has the potential to enter into the water table, and once that water table is polluted, the people who did the fracking are simply going to declare bankruptcy and move on. The people, the citizen, will be left with that contamination, which may last for generations. And so it is high time that we began to deal with environmental justice, and that's whether it was in nature or whether it occurs in the legal system, because believe me, your environment has an impact upon you, and you may not be aware of it until it is too late. And so you need to be aware of your political environment, you need to be aware of your social environment, you need to be aware of your health environment, your economic environment, and all of these various designations which we have been able to identify, those and so many more, of that one self-same environment. I always wondered why so many people in Houston, Texas, came down with blood cancers of the blood. How was that? And there was a lot of it was concentrated among our people that were forced in the olden days to live in one little area there, live in Fifth Ward, live in Central Garden, live in Trinity Garden, and so many cases, Third Ward, all like that, coming down with diseases of cancer of the blood. That is not natural. That is unnatural. That was man-made. And so you can see the interest that we must take in our environment. And then the other component, of course, in the social justice action must be that we must deal with the economic injustice that our people, speaking of black people again, have so historically suffered, because our wages were circumscribed, our jobs too were circumscribed, and you could have a PhD, but you could only be a janitor, a custodian, or be a postal worker, or be a teacher for many, or be a waiter and other menial type jobs for many generations here in this country. Why? Because the people who were in power, who were in charge, had said so, and they designated it, and you could not get a decent paying job that paid more than what the society was willing for you to earn. And I believe to a great extent that still maintains even in 2021. And so we have been defrauded and exploited by the economic system and by the social system and by the social justice system. And so for all of these reasons and more, we need reparations. I was talking to a trader. Thank God they don't trade slaves no more. But this trader was complaining about the people, poor people like myself, getting a stimulus check, and said that it make you lazy. You don't want to take a job. Well, now if a stimulus check pays you more than they pay you on a job, as you heard me say, ain't no sense in you knocking yourself out for nothing. If hard work was all it took to get wealthy and make it in America, every slave coming out of slavery would have been a millionaire, at least 1 million, for all of those hard work, hard labor that they were subjected to and that they produce and that they perform. And so just hard work alone is not certainly not going to remedy past injustices, which I had a witness. Now, our reparation scripture says that if thy brother, an Hebrew man or an Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee and serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him or her go free from thee, and when thou sendest them out free from thee, thou shalt not let them go away empty, but thou shalt supply them, furnish them liberally. The Bible word furnish them liberally out of thy flock and out of thy floor and out of thy winepress. Of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give unto them. And so the first two things are quite startling. One, that slavery was lasted no longer than 6 years, and then when in the year of the 7th year, which would be the year of the Jubilee, you were to help them in every way you could so that they could go away with something in hand, that they wouldn't have to worry about where they're going to sleep that night or what they're going to eat that night or what they're going to wear that night. He said, thou shalt furnish them liberally out of thy flock and out of thy floor and out of thy winepress. The flock, that's all of the out of the flock, the sheep, and the goats, the camels, ox, and all of that type of thing. You were to thoroughly furnish these people so they wouldn't go away empty. You see, and that was the thing that always hampered the formerly enslaved, is that so many were put off the plantation with nothing. So they had to turn right around because they didn't know no other lifestyle and go right back onto the plantation. And the man treated them worse when they came back than he treated them when they were slaves. Because when they were slaves, he had to take care of them because they were his property. But now they're not his property. He didn't have to feed them. He didn't have to clothe them. He didn't have to give them no shelter. He didn't have to see to their sickness or their wound. And so the last lot of our people was made decidedly worse than the original slavery here that we endured in these United States of America. And we need to revisit the records of U.S. history, American history, with an open eye, and look at the contradictions and the antithetical language and the difference, the cognitive dissonance between language and practice, movement and memory that form the early years of this nation that we call great and that we all love. Although you could wonder if the people that were up on the White House Capitol trying to assault the police officer, whether they really loved America as much as they claimed that they did. You know, I was looking back at the Declaration of Independence And there was a letter written by Abraham Lincoln to a friend of his in which he asked the question, was the Declaration of Independence a self-evident truth, or was the Declaration of Independence a self-evident lie? And what Lincoln said to his friend, I'm going to read it here so I won't make a mistake. It's Abraham Lincoln, I'm quoting. He says, when we were the political slaves of King George and wanted to be free, we called the maxim that all men are created equal a self-evident truth. But now, when we have grown fat and have lost all dread of being slaves ourselves, we have become so greedy to be masters that we call the same maxim a self-evident lie. 4th of July has not quite dwindled away. It is still a great day for burning firecrackers. That was Abraham Lincoln. And what he was referencing to was, of course, back in the founding of the country, the nation, when the people we call the patriots, the founding fathers, fathers of liberty and justice for all, they felt that what they were receiving, the treatment they were receiving from King George III, reduced them to slavery. Let me read what John Dickinson in 1768 argued. Those who are taxed without their own consent, expressed by themselves or their representatives, are slaves. Keep in mind, at the same time, they were enforcing servitude, slavery, upon every dark-skinned person that they purchased off of the ships, whether it was a good ship Jesus, or the good ship of Zion, or whatever other name that those slave ships bore. The Africans who were shipped off of Goree Island and from Ghana and from Senegal and all of those points on what was originally the Gold Coast, they were doomed into form to a perpetual slavery, far worse slavery than had ever been practiced on the face of the earth. And it was instituted strictly because of economics, because the people who were powerful enough to enslave another people could make great gain. Queen Elizabeth I was convinced by her not clerks, but the people who worked around her, I can't think of the names, that courtiers and all of that, that England could make a lot of money in the slave trade. And she finally got into the slave trade and started trading in human beings, trading in human souls. Yes, and that's, but these same people, when they were over here, when they were transported, those that were shipped from England to the New World, and of course landed in Plymouth Rock and New York and those places, listen to their language when they are being taxed by King George III, as I read. They said they're being reducing us to slavery. If we are forced to pay, in other words, we're taxed without our own consent, expressed by themselves or our representatives, we are slaves. We are taxed without our consent, expressed by ourselves or our representatives. We are therefore slaves. And listen to Josiah Quincy a few years later. I speak it with grief. I speak it with anguish. Britons are our oppressors. I speak it with shame. I speak it with indignation. We are slaves. Juxtaposition. Wouldn't you think that they would cry out and protest slavery, but at the same time, they were holding thousands, yea, millions by the time the slave trade ended, of African people who were proud people, who had a nation, who had a civilization. Indeed, the cradle of civilization was in the Nile Valley, and yet through the rewrite of history, because history is always written by the conquerors, while the accomplishments of all of those great generations, all of those great civilizations were what? Wiped out. And late Dr. Quote, I hate to keep running back to him, but he was a very good example. Late Dr. John Henry Clark said that he went to a lawyer that he was working for, doing menial, keeping the place clean and stuff like that. And he asked the man, he said, can you give me a book where I can study my people's history? And the lawyer, of course, was white. No black lawyers during that time. Well, there were, but very few. The lawyer said, the attorney said to Dr. John Henry Clark, I'm sorry, John, but you come from a people that they ain't never done nothing. They ain't got no history. You see? So that is why history is so vital, you see, because if your history starts with slavery, then everything else is improvement. But of course, our history does not start with slavery. Our history started way back in the Nile Valley. As a matter of fact, the first civilizations were not white, were not European. First civilizations were black, of course, for thousands of years, coming from the Nile Valley. As a matter of fact, when 850 BC, when Homer wrote his Iliad, Dr. John Henry Clark remarks that Egypt had already had 18 dynasties. They had heaped up the pyramids. They had developed mathematics, lower and higher mathematics. They had developed geometry and algebra and letters and writing. As a matter of fact, when you study the writings of the original white explorers who went into the continent of Africa, they wrote back and told their people, which you don't read that in school, said these people have great cities and very well run and very well civilized, and the like. But when the history book was rewritten by the conquerors, then quite naturally the conqueror said that he came into Africa to bring civilization. No such thing. They called the Africans cannibals, but see, the Africans didn't need to be cannibals. They had plenty animals around there. They grew what they needed, or they hunted for what they needed. They had no need for no cannibalism. There wasn't nobody hungry on the continent of Africa. Go back and look at the record, the old record. Don't just look at what they taught you in school. Go look at the record. And so that's what makes history so important, so compelling, and so imperative for you and I. Going back to my original illustration, when one of the Congress people in the Congress of the United States, whether he was a senator or a representative, could blithely say that if you didn't see the writing that said it was a January 6th insurrection, well, when you looked at the people in the statuary hall, you would say that this was no more than just a group of people walking blithely, politely, obediently between the stanchions, looking at the statuary in statuary hall. Well, of course, when you look at the other footage and you see what was really going on, then you know that that is a rewrite of history. But remember, the victor always writes history. And if you want the record straight, you must be responsible for straightening out that record. And just as now in the last, let's say the last 40 years, but even more so now within the last 10 years, there's been a great push to push the dark shadows back and look again at the record of civilization, at the record of history, and then we began to see that the people who were said there were no people, why those people were the people who made civilizations possible, speaking of Africa, and those of us who are of African descent. We even found out that Africans had come to 5 minutes, had sailed from the shores of Africa under the leadership of the king of Mali, 400 ships, and they had caught the current and had sailed all the way to the shores of America. Whereas Columbus, for all of his bravado and all of his reputation, was lost at sea, and when he landed his ships, or at least when the Arawaks found Columbus and his men on that shore, Columbus thought that he had found India, but those people were not Indian. That's why he called them West Indies. Those people were not on the west. He was supposed to be on the opposite side of the world, but yet he's celebrated as a great hero and as a great navigator. And when he was lost, even though he was lost, and sooner or later they're going to take his statue down because he was no more than a murderer, butcher, and a thug. You read the writings of Bartolome de las Casas, and you begin to get the real character. And of course you can read the dispatches and the writings of Columbus himself. For he himself wrote down in his journals and his log that he required all of his crew to sign a piece of paper saying that they had landed in India. And he said if they didn't sign it, he had their tongues cut out. That was Christopher Columbus. And so history, as Dr. Clark said, is a clock. It tells the people the cultural and political time. It is also a compass that tells the person where they are in the geography of history, or of life rather, and what they must do and where they must go. And it is way past time for we who are black and sojourn here, we who are African Americans and have sojourned here on this continent and have attained some affluence and attained a far better life than our slave forebears. It is way past time for us to begin to do way better in recording the history, as to quote the late attorney Charles Hamilton Houston, who was the mastermind of all of those cases that led up to Brown v. Board. He said that a Negro lawyer is either a social engineer or he's a parasite on the social body. In other words, by being a social engineer, he must learn how to take that Constitution and help his people, or else he's just getting paid to hold his people down in poverty. As we wrap up, we have spoke about a few things, labored over a few things, and we must continue our search. I would encourage you to do a lot of your own reading. I'm always reading. I got a book here right now, an old book, In the Matter of Color, by the late Dr. A.L. Higginbotham, who was an attorney himself and a professor, A. Leon Higginbotham. But it will reward you if you will research it out, if you will actually look at it. And again, as we wrap up, we thank God that we're beginning to see our way out of this pandemic, and that we will have the opportunity going forward probably to resume a lot of our original ways of living. Hopefully that we will. And to you, my brothers and my sisters, I pray that you will continue to improve and be in good health, even as thy soul prospereth, as John said. And continue to be prayerful, continue to seek God, continue to press for the truth, know the truth, tell the truth, live the truth, and may that truth forever set you free. Remember likewise, for those of you that are working at these thankless tasks, these thankless jobs, these jobs where they, to have a job, you got to have welfare. You don't need that kind of job. You need a job that allows you to have opportunity to put some money away for the future and take care of your family with a good health insurance package and the like. You deserve that. You deserve that. And if the job can't give it to you, then the government ought to offer it to you. And sooner that we get on to universal health care, the better. And I say again, as I always say in closing, if you're working on a job and them folks don't want to give you no decent hours, and they want you to come in at all hours, and you don't know never when you're going to come in, what shift you're going to work. And they get in there, they work you 7 hours, won't let you have 8 hours, or they'll work you 4 hours and send you home, and all that kind of foolishness. Those people don't want you to pay you no money. And if they don't want to pay you while you're young, while you got a chance, shake the dust off your feet and get away from those people. If they don't want to pay you, don't work for them. Thank you, Doc. We're out of here.
And some sleepless nights